Hello, welcome to Self-Care Sensory Sessions. Today we're going to make some scented spice paint. So I made these paints up with a homemade paint recipe, and then I added some spice to them. First of all, I'm going to make the paint recipe. So for this one you need some flour, some olive oil and some cold water. I took 2 cups of plain flour, 2.5 cups of the cold water, and then 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and then mix that all together until it was smooth as possible. The benefit of making your own paint for this one means that the paint's non-toxic and it doesn't matter if it ends up in people's mouths. Once your paint base has been stirred and is blended together nicely, they can then be divided into however many bowls that you plan to make, with different flavours added a bit later on. So the herbs and spices I'm going to use to scent my paints today are cocoa powder, cinnamon, ginger, turmeric, vanilla, some fresh sage, fresh basil, rosemary and some mint. So I started off with making the turmeric paint. I took 2 teaspoons of turmeric and then I stirred it into the paint, making sure that it was evenly spread the whole way through, and then it was ready to go. I repeated the technique again with the cocoa powder, cinnamon, ginger and vanilla. It's important to make sure that you use herbs and spices that the person you're working with enjoys, so the person you're working with gets the full benefit of being able to smell the paint. The more of the ingredient that you add to the paint mixture, the stronger the scent will be. My favourite of these ones was definitely the cocoa powder. It smelled a lot like chocolate brownies. To use the fresh herbs it was a little bit different, so I took a pestle and mortar and then I put my basil leaves into it, and I used it to crush it down until it was a bit more of oil and sort of paste. I then added in the paint mixture into the pestle and mortar and then stirred it around to make sure that all the basil was evenly distributed throughout the paint mixture. I then transferred this back into its original pot and added in half a teaspoon of plain flour just to thicken it up because the basil was quite watery, and then it was the same consistency as the other spice paints I had made. I then repeated the same process again with the fresh mint, the fresh sage and the fresh rosemary, making sure that I took the rosemary leaves off the wooded stalk that it grows from, and then added in the flour again to make sure that it was the same consistency as the rest of the paint. This should also work as well with the dry herbs. I just happened to have fresh herbs available. Once I finished all that, I was happy that I had a good range of different coloured paints with lots of different scents, and then I started to paint. So here I painted a sunflower. I thought it went really nice with the colour palette we had, and it smelled really quite interesting with turmeric and the chocolate together. As you can see, I'm using paintbrushes, but this would also be perfect for fingerprinting or painting with feet or anything else sensory that the person you're working with enjoys. You can make lots of different pictures or just mark making on paper. Also, the person you're working with might just enjoy the smell of these things, so you might not necessarily need to paint with them right away. I will say that these paints won't keep at all, so they need to be used and then disposed of straight away after you finish this activity. Thank you very much for watching Silva Sensory Sessions. We hope you've enjoyed today, and we'll see you again soon.